Hey, welcome to the third devlog. Over the last 2 weeks, I worked a ton on a complex terrain generation system, which took an unexpectedly long amount of time. This is probably one of the most challenging sets of implementations into my game yet. I encountered countless strange bugs, and though it does still have bugs, it's complete enough to show off. I also want to reiterate the goal of the project again, if I haven't already previously, and that the goal for this whole game is really for me to learn and grow my understanding of coding, trying to recreate complex features from my favorite games in unique ways to try and understand their systems, which I definitely think I achieved through this update. Now I want to show you the finished product before talking about the creation process, because most people just want to see what it turned out to be. The first thing you'll notice is the main menu, first of all, has a change in the GUI sprites. I used to draw each button in pixel art with a second sprite for the hovered over form, but I found the button system unnecessarily useless, as the new GUI for the buttons looks much better in my opinion, and is much more customizable. The brand new content begins after you select a character, where you are prompted on a screen to select a world. You can create a world, in which only current settings are size and name. Once doing so and loading in for the first time, it will generate that world. Once it is done, we can play as usual. The current biomes are just placeholders, as I wanted to have something to show off the ability of the terrain generation and its potential. I also had to fix up a lot of code involving the resources and items, since the revamping devlog brought in a lot of new game mechanic changes. Also, the world selection works in multiplayer. As you can see, I can choose to make or join a lobby. If I make a lobby, I can select from my worlds and then make the lobby. Alright, now let's get into the actual creation of the system. I think the system took a while to make, as after the last video I kept putting off the system because I knew it would be very complicated and would take up tons of time. It was about Friday 2 weeks ago when I finally took the plunge and began intensive planning, which I didn't think was enough. I filled up countless pages with notes and ideas, as well as typing out some basic code before I even got started. Though it was a little bit messy, the planning definitely guided me throughout my work. After planning it out, I began creating the creation GUI which you saw earlier. This I hadn't planned a lot, but I had lots of ideas on how it should be based off of world generation screens of both Terraria as well as Minecraft, because they had similar systems and features. This is also the time where I decided to redo the GUI for the game's buttons. I drew these in a similar way, yet adding a shadow behind the sprite. I created different sizes and shapes, knowing I need them in some way. I also obviously lightened up the color palette, and I also upped the resolution of the actual buttons. Now that I had a basic system for the GUI in place, which would find itself in other rework in later portions of the week, I began on just basic placement of tiles in a grid. As I said, I want to take ideas and inspiration from other games, but with a unique and challenging twist, so I chose to create the tiles in a hexagon shape. I use this shape because it does tile, but it is also used a lot less in other games for its slightly upped complexity. I began generating a set of tiles in a grid based upon the player's chosen world size. This required a bit of math and a lot of for loops, but after lots of issues with the math, I had a basic way of creating tiles in a pattern in whatever way I wanted. Next, as every game has, it needed some way to spice it up so it wasn't the same tile over and over, something that would make the game seem slightly more natural. Once more grabbing ideas from other games, I knew biomes would be the way to go. To make things easier, down the road, I created a scriptable object for biomes. But to make things even more easier, I have dimensions which determine which set of biomes and specifics are to be created. So the terrain generator takes in a dimension, and from there it has access to those biomes. The biomes contain scriptable objects for tiles. These tiles have a sprite and a name. Depending on the biome settings I have set, it will be spawned somewhere within the grid of tiles. The biomes are assigned by a circle collider which slowly grows larger depending on the sizes I set. This collider will collide with tiles that have temporary colliders and tell them what biome they are to associate with. The tile takes the biome and chooses a random tile from that biome and sets itself to that. These biome assigners, as they are called, can override each other, which gives the game a more natural landscape and look. Now that I have biomes and tiles in my game, I need the player to be able to save their worlds. Since I already have 3 testing biomes, the red, green, and blue biomes, I just had to rework part of my save system that's already part of the game to just remember certain information about these tiles, so that we could save and load them, which I actually figured out was super easy. Any class in C# can be simply marked with a system.serializable tag, and as long as all the variables within that class are primitive data types such as lists, integers, strings, and more, then they could be easily saved. I I first made a way for the game to save your worlds you create in the creation menu in a class called world data. Each world has its own independent world data. I then added to the world data class another class called world regions, which stores all the tile data. I create a list of all the world data as we have and ship that in a list to the static save system class, which serializes it to a file using an XML serializer. The reason I used an XML serializer is because, as far as I found when I did the inventory saving months ago, lists could not be binarily serialized. But if anyone watching this knows if lists can be serialized in typical binary, please comment on that, as current players can edit all of this data with ease, which can corrupt and break things because it's simply written to a text file instead of converted to a ton of characters. Now, the last thing I added to the terrain generation system specifically is what I call, and I think I slightly hate the name, but toppers. These are essentially any object I want to place on top of a tile. This includes things like rocks, bushes, and trees, etc. I made a scriptable object class for the toppers so that they had an object, a name, and a tile that they preferred to generate on with a chance of how often they would do so. These became a part of the biome scriptable object so that certain toppers will spawn only in specific biomes and only on certain tiles. Finally, the last major thing I implemented, which was probably the most unnecessarily complicated and buggiest thing, was the implementation of syncing multiplayer. I haven't done much testing with that, so I'm sure there's an incredible amount of issues with that, but I knew I had to get a video out this week, so I'm going to work out the bugs in the background over the next few weeks so I can focus on actual content updates. The syncing essentially works where the master client will load the terrain as usual. The default terrain tiles are generated for everyone when they join, and upon someone joining, the master client calls for each tile to send a compressed packet of its current data to the script that runs the lobby. This then calls a function across all the clients that sets the data of the master client's tiles and toppers. It definitely needs optimization and more testing, but as I said, I'll be doing that in the background as time goes on. Okay, wow, that was a lot of talking and information. The next week of content is a much simpler set of things that I want to do, and the video will be much less complicated and probably more fun. By the way, if you ever want to know what I'm doing in the following videos, it'll always be posted in the description. Also, once again, thanks for a lot of the support from the last one. We somehow got 17 subscribers since then, so I guess people are interested in this, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. This time I promise it'll be posted next Monday as usual.